Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. NFL Super Bowl week underway. At that Super Bowl week, former Browns running back Kareem Hunt, now with the Chiefs, getting ready to play in the Super Bowl, was asked about his former teammate Myles Garrett's request for a trade.
I understand, he want to win. He want to be able to, experience a Super Bowl. He want to be on a great program. And right now, I feel like he's been there 8 years, and he's trying his best to do everything to help the team win. I don't fault him for feeling that way. I hope everything works out. I hope the best for Cleveland and everything. I wish he could help turn it around. I try to do the best to help too.
Are you surprised when you heard that news?
I'm a little bit, yeah. I know how much he cares for Cleveland and the community and how hard he works, but he's getting up there now. Like, he wants to win and wants to win now, but I just, wish him the best.
Do you think they have the pieces in place to win now?
Yeah, they got a bunch of great talent and everything. I feel like, the players and everybody is just amazing and have so much talent and experience. And, I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully one day Cleveland figures it out.
Will you reach out to him at all? Being a guy from Cleveland and, being a former teammate, maybe not right now because of what you have going on in your play, but will you reach out to him at some point, or will you let him reach out to you?
If he wants to reach out to me, I'll let him reach out to me. Right now, I know he's dealing with a bunch of stuff, so I'm going to let him, deal what he got to do and handle his business.
Kareem Hunt, Northeast Ohio native, went to Willoughby South High School, talking about Myles Garrett's request for a trade. All right, so if the Browns wanted to trade Myles Garrett, something to keep in mind, they'd be left with a 2025 dead cap hit of $36.2 million and some change. Money is related to what was paid in 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. It's not new money. It's accounted for in previous contracts that have already been paid for by the team. Same process the Browns have done with many other players that allows them to continue to spend money on free agents year after year. So important to note, there would be a huge dead cap hit, and they're already going to be dealing with that, some of that relative to the Deshaun Watson contract. This is kind of an ancillary thing. If, in fact, Myles Garrett is traded, Joel Bitonio has talked about potentially retiring, and a Garrett trade could kind of impact that and trigger another guy to step away because veterans, it's a short shelf life in the NFL. They don't want to go through a rebuilding process. When you think about that, quarterback play is hugely important. A quarterback that has been tied to the Browns, that has won in the NFL, Kirk Cousins. He also has ties to Kevin Stefanski. Played for him in Minnesota and had some success. This year, had a really good first half of the season, then struggled down the stretch. He was asked, Good Morning Football overtime, how healthy that surgically repaired Achilles tendon was, and how healthy was he?
I think the Achilles healed well. I think there was a little bit of just trying to get my right ankle back around the Achilles, but the Achilles itself healed really well. And even then, we were 6-3, was playing well, doing a lot of good things, even if the right ankle wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect in this league. We're never feeling 100%. So it didn't really affect me too much. But then against the Saints, got hit pretty good in my right shoulder and elbow. And from there, kind of dealing with that, was something I was working through and just never really could get it to where I wanted it. And so now that the season's over, you have the time and the energy to say, okay, let's get the right ankle back. Let's get the shoulder back. Let's get the elbow back. And if we can do that, feel like I got a new life ahead of me here in pro football.
So it does explain what happened second half of the year to Kirk Cousins, who kind of went into a nosedive, and that's the reason that Michael Penix was able to step in and replace him. Likely to be released. He has no trade, so he can veto places that he's going to go, being Kirk Cousins. Could be a really cheap option for the Browns at quarterback. This is kind of interesting as well. You talk about wide receivers. Well, Cooper Kupp has been informed that the L.A. Rams will be seeking to trade him in the offseason. Kupp announcing that during Super Bowl week. So a name to keep an eye on. We know Andrew Berry has had some success trading lower round draft picks and acquiring pretty good wide receivers. This also, some interesting news. Jackson Dart has kind of established himself as a top quarterback prospect in the eyes of the Browns and the Giants. Browns reportedly very high on Dart, potentially selecting him with one of their picks. Andrew Berry reportedly, again, a lot of reportedlys in this from the NFL Rookie Watch, loves Dart's processing ability and his accuracy from in the pocket. Dart firmly QB3 on a number of NFL teams' boards as of now that would be behind Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, the two top ones. Turn our attention to the Cavaliers. They're getting ready to host the Boston Celtics tonight. As it stands now, Cavs 5.5 in front of Boston for the top spot in the Eastern Conference. This will be the third of four meetings between the Cavs and the Celtics. They've split them one apiece. NBA national analyst Brian Windhorst was asked about tonight's game in this matchup.
Are these teams coming to play tonight, or is it just a regular season game in February?
I think the Cavs come to play every night. So if you've watched the Celtics at all recently, their offense has really, really sort of been cut down to size. Having said that, they still can get so hot. You know, they were down Saturday. Was it Saturday? No, Sunday. They were down 26 in the second half to the 76ers. Came back and won that game because they can get so hot from three-point range. Their level of play is just not what it has been, and it's getting more and more concerning. And so, this game is not going to define anything. Right. The Cavs are in great position to get the number one seed.
And, of course, with the number one seed comes home court advantage. Cavs have one of the best home records, one of the best road records, too, but they have one of the best home records in all of basketball. Let's turn our attention to the Guardians. Spring training truck is on its way to Arizona. Pitchers and catchers will be reporting soon. The Guardians re-signed veteran catcher Austin Hedges in the offseason. Hedges a good clubhouse guy, really good defense, struggles at the plate. He was asked on SiriusXM's Major League Channel just about the attitude of the Guardians.
You know, one of the things we talked about in Cleveland last year, like immediately in spring training, was World Series. World Series is the goal. It's not win a game. It's not win a division. It's not get to the playoffs. It's win the World Series. It's World Series or bust. This is what we expect. This is what we are trying to do. So every day in spring, the boys are like, when you're going out and you're getting your lift in, you're hitting, you're throwing bullpens, your intent is preparing to win the World Series. It's not preparing to do good. It's not preparing to be an all-star. It's preparing to win a World Series. And I swear we talked about it every single day. That was the big difference when I went to Texas, got traded over there. And it was really one of the first times, I think I'd always talked about winning, but in a different way. And then in Texas, everyone's like, no, we're winning the World Series this year. It's non-negotiable. This is what we're doing. This is the only option. And there's something about when you talk about it that way. Now everybody's work is going towards that. So that's what we did last year. And obviously, we came up a little bit short, but at the same time, I don't think there's a whole lot of people in the world that would have predicted the Guardians in the ALCS last year, or even winning our division. So just straight up talking about that, especially with a young team, made it clear to everybody what the expectation was. And then in doing so, it makes everyone play better. If you're playing winning baseball, you yourself are going to have individual success too.
Austin Hedges talking about the mindset that he expects from the Guardians again this season. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. We are talking Browns and Myles Garrett when Sports4CLE continues. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
How you doing? This is Chad in Idaho. I got this breaking news about Myles, and this is just a sad day, but Deshaun Watson, I feel, has completely sucked the momentum that we've put together the last 5 years of trying to break out of that losing culture that we had. As far as Myles, he wants to win, and I get that. The point I want to make is that this trade has to happen before the draft so we can get compensation. And to me, unfortunately, this looks like a full commitment to a rebuild 100% in an effort to set us in the best position for when the Brook Park Stadium gets open.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, they don't have to trade him. He's under contract for 2 more years. If they trade him, as we mentioned in the first segment, the news segment that we do now, there's a $36 million cap hit. So you really can't trade him relative to the cap and what you're going to do because you're carrying the dead cap money from Deshaun Watson. And Fred, you know how these work in the front office. Every time you make a trade like the Deshaun Watson trade, there's a risk and a reward. You look at the best case scenario and you look at the worst case scenario. We're living the worst case scenario of a trade like that right now. It can't get much worse than what we've got from the Deshaun Watson trade. I know you've written an article about it. Take us through that.
Yeah, I mean it's the continual fallout of that, and not only was it the $230 million, the 3 first rounds, the 3rd round, the 2 fourth rounds, the 6 draft picks, but now you have a ripple effect where now it's continuing to affect your team. You don't have a quarterback, and your best player now has demanded a trade. Now, whether they accommodate him or not, I don't know, as you outlined, because of the constraints. Even if they wanted to, I mean, the reason Deshaun Watson's still on the roster is because they can't get rid of him because of the dead cap, and you got that again with Myles Garrett, and there's not too many teams that can absorb, the draft picks or do what it takes. So you're sitting in the situation. Absolutely, it's turned out to be the worst possible scenario. We talked about it even last year in the offseason that if Deshaun Watson could just play all 17 games and just be an average quarterback, this team can win. They probably will never go deep or win the Super Bowl unless he gets back to the level he was. But I really expected him to play at least average. He played historically bad. I mean, the numbers just were off the charts. And so, at this time last year, Myles Garrett was quoted by ESPN saying, the ultimate is to play your entire career with a team and win a championship. And even in October this year, he wanted to finish his career with the Browns. And now it's a complete about face, even from the last time we talked to him. And I don't know exactly what has happened. The timing of this is very curious. He puts out a statement after a week with his buddies at the Pro Bowl. I don't know, what his peers are saying. Hey, you need to get out of there. This is the way you do it. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but he's represented by Clutch Sports, and that's LeBron James. I've been told that he has spoken LeBron, and maybe they advised him this is the way to do it, to put pressure. I don't know. But it's an ugly situation, and even now going forward, you can mend the fences. We saw this with Lamar Jackson demanded to be traded. I don't think people remember much about that anymore. Brandon Ayuk, even this year, there's 3 or 4 just in the last little bit. I think Trey Hendrickson, demanded a trade, and T. Higgins and so forth. So I don't think he's necessarily trying to negotiate for a big contract because I think he's going to get that. But you talk about winning a Super Bowl. Okay, Dave, don't you think everybody wants to win a Super Bowl? I know some guys want to make money, but if you let him do what he wants, do you think he even can guarantee he's going to win a Super Bowl if you trade him to the Chiefs or the Bills? You know, they might be on the doorstep, but there's no guarantee. I mean, we're looking at history. If the Chiefs win this year, it'd be like the only time a team has done it three times.
Yep.
So it is literally a lottery, when it comes to Super Bowl. And why would you trade him to a team that's going to be drafted 30th?
Yeah.
People wouldn't like me saying this.
No, you don't. You don't.
Kyrie Irving asked to be traded, I would have traded him to Sacramento. I wouldn't trade him to the Chiefs or the Bills or the Ravens why would you do that? I mean, unless the Browns are just going to say, we're just going to step back and step out of the NFL for a while. Why would they give up everything they have just to accommodate a player?
Yeah.
Saw how that worked out with OBJ. They basically let him torpedo the season, and he won a Super Bowl because he got to pick where he wanted to go, and worked out.
The concerning thing with Myles is it isn't about the money. If it was about the money, you pull out the checkbook and Jimmy Haslam writes a check and Andrew Berry figures out how to push it down the road, and that's even more concerning. What he's doing is he's putting a lot of pressure on Andrew Berry to improve this roster. And Andrew Berry probably felt it initially. He probably feels it a whole lot more. So it's going to be interesting. I know you wrote a lot of articles about the offensive line. How much of the problem, and you took it by the guards and the tackles and the center, how much problem of the offensive line was because they completely changed what they were trying to do to build an offense around Deshaun Watson, and how much of it was because the offensive line is getting a little older?
Well, that's the big question. If you go by grading, I think Pro Football Focus had Conklin playing some of his best, after he finally got playing. I'm not an offensive line guru. Yeah, they're in their 30s, but all of them were excited that I talked to, Conklin, Bitonio, about going back to the wide zone, what they really had done 4 years before. I think that personally, I thought they looked a lot better when you change quarterbacks. I mean, all of a sudden, Jameis Winston wasn't going down every other play because he was more in the pocket. I think Deshaun Watson moving around back there, they never knew where he was going to be, and he ran into sacks. I know the offensive line, is getting the age, but I think the biggest question right now to me is left tackle. Do you turn it over to DeJuan Jones or do you go out and get somebody? But as far as I think they're fine, especially if they go back wide zone. You drafted Zach Zinner next year. They've drafted an offensive lineman every year. The question is, do you use one high in the draft? I think the highest was back when Wills, and we see how that turned out. That's why they have a hole. He should be a Pro Bowl left tackle for the next even 5-10 more years. So with you got to determine now, what's going to give the most bang for your buck immediately if you're looking to the draft. But I think that you can't fix it all. I think the interior's pretty good, providing Bitonio comes back. Conklin's pretty good at right tackle. You just got to make sure that you got a left tackle that can, step in and play as well. So, yeah, I think they got other situations right now other than the line. Sure, you need, but the people that evaluate it, I think more of it was the system necessarily. System shock to change it all on the fly. Those guys never really played in that run pass option, type of a situation.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear what some of the national media thinks about the Myles Garrett trade request. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Dan Orlovsky, former NFL quarterback, on the Myles Garrett trade request. This from ESPN's Unsportsmanlike.
Which piece of news intrigues you more from yesterday, Myles Garrett or Cooper Kupp?
Oh, the Myles Garrett one. And I love Cooper. I still think Cooper can play. Myles Garrett doesn't come around. I mean, this is a guy that if you have a pulse at quarterback, you automatically are in Super Bowl conversation. Guys like Myles Garrett do not, and I don't know how available he is and all that, but they don't become available. Could you imagine if J.J. Watt became available in the middle of his career, or Aaron Donald became available in the middle of his career? Could you imagine how many sacks Myles Garrett would get if his team wasn't always down 14-0 and his team was up? I mean, this guy is a remarkable player that automatically vaults you into the we are legit Super Bowl contenders if you are a team that has a decent quarterback player at decent quarterback play. So, I mean, I said this back in January or the beginning of January. The Vikings, where are they with the quarterback situation? If the Vikings are a team, there's like, wait, we want Sam Darnold. We actually do want to re-sign Sam Darnold. And now we can dangle J.J. McCarthy for Myles Garrett. No-brainer.
No-brainer for both teams.
No-brainer. Exactly. And that little bit with Chicago's or Cleveland's perspective is how much do they like the quarterbacks in this draft? Or could you imagine Washington? If Washington got Myles Garrett, thank you. So the Myles Garrett one is way more appealing.
So, Fred, we've talked about this a little bit. And the only way you're going to get Garrett to be willing to stay, you're going to have to redo the contract, make him the highest paid player in the league defensively or thereabouts. And you've got to show him that this roster can win. You've got to find a quarterback that he sees a potential to win. Does Andrew Berry have enough flexibility because of the Deshaun Watson contract and all that's going on? Does he have enough flexibility to remake the roster to a level that would convince Myles Garrett they can be successful? My guess is no. That's why he requested the trade.
Well, he thinks they're closer to the 3-14 than the 11-6 that he talked about wanting to stay last year. But I guess the thing is, I do think with the way they structure contracts, they can do a lot. I mean, one of our Jack Duffin, you've had him on, he says they can restructure and free up as much as $89 million, So as long as Jimmy Haslam's willing to pay the cash, and I'm sure he is now with all the pressure, I think I'm not worried about that. A Cooper Kupp is in their wheelhouse, those are the type, the Amari Cooper, the Jerry Jeudy that you pick up for very little, and all you have to do is be willing to pay them. I'm not saying that's who they're going to go after, but a trade and restructuring and so forth is what they do. So they just have to be able to do it where it affects them the most. Now, Myles Garrett could be your biggest chance to get the quarterback, but that hurts you in the other side of it. So you could look at it this way. They were 3-14 with Myles. If you traded and you were able to, I've been saying this all along, you need to have a franchise quarterback. That's why they did what they did. They thought they were getting it solved with Deshaun Watson. It's blown up in their face, but they have to be aggressive and turn over every stone. J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold, one of those, if there's a way you can swing and get somebody like that. The thing about McCarthy, that's like drafting him because he's on a rookie contract. I don't know what they think of him. I don't know if he's the answer, but you have to come out solving your biggest problem, because if you just trade Garrett and you get draft picks, you don't have anything to replace still at quarterback. and you still don't. Now you have to replace your best player on the defensive line. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. I think you got to get the quarterback, and you got to get that as your top priority. I mean, obviously, he's not happy with the situation where it is now, but you just have to, I think, right the ship. I felt like the defense was the quickest way to be fixed. Get some more pieces there, get back to being a top 10 defense, and then your offense, adequate quarterback play, whether it's Kirk Cousins or whoever it might be. I think you can win a lot of games and get back to playoffs. I don't know if you're ready for the Super Bowl, but until you get that quarterback. And that's where I'm saying, if you really think Cam Ward is your answer and the Titans think they're going to take him, well, you trade Garrett to get up to number 1, and you take Cam Ward, and then you take Abdul Carter or something like that, or opposite if it's Shedeur Sanders, do it with the Giants. But you have to come out like the Texans actually did with some of the assets they got from the Browns in the Watson trade. They came out with C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, your cornerstone on both sides of the ball. If you choose to move on from Garrett, and this is your chance to go younger all the way around, you got to come out solving those two problems.
Yeah, and you're not going to have a lot of opportunities. But you got to be right. The problem is they haven't been right. And that adds even another level of pressure. And that might be by design by Myles Garrett. He's added more pressure. You better get this right, because if you're not, your cornerstone defensive end doesn't want to be here. All right, before I let you go, this is from the Bleacher Report, and I disagree with this wholeheartedly. I'm curious about your take on it. Top potential cap casualties who could be steals for other teams in 2025. They say Jack Conklin. Conklin is one of a handful of players who can be released before June 1st and still clear cap room, $4.6 million in this case. Waiting until after that date would allow the Browns to save an additional $10 million, so it's pretty clear he'll be up for grabs at some point in this offseason. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think if you now, instead of solving left tackle, you got to solve left tackle and right tackle and edge rusher and quarterback. Jack Conklin, you find a way to bring the cap number down, extend years, whatever you need to do. Jack Conklin, to your point, played pretty well when he was healthy last year.
Yeah, you need to add to what you have. You unless you're in a full-blown rebuild. But I don't think they have that mindset. It may change. Like I said, they've had a history of kind of accommodating guys, and I don't know what they'll do with Myles Garrett, if they'll hold the line. But to the point on him, I don't think he's going to sit out. He doesn't get paid. He doesn't get anything if you don't play when you're under contract for 2 more years. But we'll see how hard he wants to go with it. But as far as Conklin, no, I'm not hearing that at all. I'm hearing just the opposite. I think nationally, they look at the cap situation. They think the Browns are destitute. They'd be more destitute trading Garrett. You'd have to fully restructure Watson again, Denzel Ward again, and cut Conklin just to get under the cap because of the trade. And so, yeah, I don't see that happening. I could be completely wrong on it, but I don't know how that gets you better when you create another hole for yourselves.
And again, the way you keep Myles Garrett is you show him the path to the playoffs, and it starts with the quarterback. I'm with you 100%. Fred Greetham, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, straight ahead. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Tom from Short Coffee. Well, it looks like we just as well go ahead and see if someone's willing to give us something crazy for Myles Garrett. Doesn't want to be here. I get it, him wanting to be on a Super Bowl team. I don't wish him any bad luck with that. But we need draft picks. We need picks for trade. Yeah, it's great to have someone generational like him, but we just need players. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, Garrett requesting a trade publicly, I don't think it lessens his value at all because there's going to be multiple, there's probably 10 teams that would like to have, maybe more. So it'll create a little bit of a bidding war. Now, I'm in no way saying that the Browns are going to trade him. I think it also kind of puts a little bit of urgency in Andrew Berry to make this roster look more appealing to try to keep Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting tightrope Andrew Berry has to walk here. Whether he wants to make a move and move on from and trade away Myles Garrett, even though Andrew Berry is, told Mary Kay Cabot of the Senior Bowl last week that even if you gave up 2 first-round picks, that they're not gonna trade Myles Garrett, because you said that. Despite the trade request, I mean, you would imagine there's going to be a massive bidding war out there for the services of Myles Garrett if indeed he is available in the market. I think if you're the Browns, you at least have to listen. But, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that there's still so much that has to be done with this roster. And I feel like if you trade away Myles Garrett, you might end up in a rebuild anyway. And what that would do would just give you a bunch of picks and help you fill the biggest need on this team, which is still quarterback. That hasn't changed because of this trade news, but certainly if you trade Myles Garrett, you're going to get, I imagine, a lot back for him.
Yeah, I would imagine. And you know what? I would imagine one of the things that prompted Myles Garrett's trade request was looking at the quarterback position. You need a quarterback to win in the NFL, without question. All right, if the Browns do make a trade for Myles Garrett, you wrote an article about what they might get. And you kind of used Khalil Mack from the Raiders. So the Bears sent a first-round pick in 2019 and 2020, a third-round pick in 2020, a sixth-round pick in 2019 to the Raiders for Khalil Mack, and a second-round pick and conditional fifth-round pick, both in 2020. So you're talking about a couple of first rounds, a third, and then a late-round pick. You might have to throw something in with Garrett to get those. In my mind, 2 first-round picks and a player is kind of the baseline.
Yeah, I feel like if you're not offering 2 firsts or a first and then a player close to that caliber, if I'm Andrew Berry, I'm not picking up the phone, because if I'm looking at Khalil Mack, that's certainly at least the baseline of what you should be getting for Myles Garrett, who I think is better now at this stage than Khalil Mack was when he got traded to the Bears, all those years ago. I just think with the impact Myles Garrett has had, I mean, you're talking a generational pass rusher. The fact that he's a Defensive Player of the Year finalist this season on a 3-14 football team tells you just how good he is. He's still got a couple years left of his prime. And when you look at just the sum that the Bears gave up, when you look at the picks they became the 24th pick in 2019 and the 19th pick in 2020. So we're talking picks in the back half of the first round. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that's going to be your expectation. That's got to be your expectation of the Browns, is that these first-round picks, they're going to come after pick 18, which are playoff teams, in which case, at some point, say 25, 26, it's basically a glorified second-round pick. So it's got to be a lot of assets coming back, and probably even more than what the Bears got for Khalil Mack.
I would agree.
Mean, what the Bears gave for Khalil Mack, sorry.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. All right. You mentioned 5 teams that could potentially pull off the blockbuster trade for Myles Garrett. Number 1, you had The Cowboys, number 2 was the Packers, Raiders, Patriots, and Commanders. Take us through that. And again, you wrote an article on this, so kind of the rationale behind those.
Well, number one with the Cowboys, I mean, Myles Garrett is a native of Dallas. And I think for the Cowboys, they've gone through a pretty rough, 2024 season. They had the contract issues with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb that they had to work through. They did not play well this season, last season, finishing 7-10. They just hired Brian Schottenheimer as their next head coach. You would imagine that Jerry Jones would want to make a splash to get, the buzz back for the Dallas Cowboys. And what better way to do that than bring the best pass rusher and a native of the Dallas-Fort Worth area back to North Texas? So, I mean, that would make a lot of sense for the Cowboys. They only have a couple $1 million of cap room, but doing quick look at over the cap.com, if you restructure the salaries of Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, that frees up an extra almost $58 million. So you can make that work, especially if that 12th overall pick was in play. With the Green Bay Packers as the second team, that to me is the most intriguing, because while they have low-end first-round picks, they have something these other teams don't have, a quarterback that you can get in Malik Willis. Now, Malik Willis didn't play a lot last season, but when he did play, he was extremely efficient. Looking at some of the advanced numbers, he was about an expected points added per play of .252, which among quarterbacks with 60-plus snaps, that was 5th best. Again, small sample size, but that's an intriguing piece if you want to try and throw another dart at fixing the quarterback position. Willis was a guy I really liked in 2022, needed some time to develop. He's going to be on the last year of his rookie contract. If you're trying to get a quarterback out of this, Green Bay might be the best bet for you. Then with the Raiders and the Patriots, I'll kind of group them together because they're both kind of in a similar boat. They have a megaton of cap space, and they could use another cornerstone defensive player. For the Raiders, it's one to pair with Max Crosby, and with the Patriots, it's putting a franchise cornerstone player on defense to complement the budding young star quarterback they have in Drake May, who I am very high on. It's just they were a bad team this year because there was nothing around them. They were arguably the least talented roster in football. You get Myles Garrett, and all of a sudden that changes that in New England. And then Washington, we saw just the massive leap they took from being the second worst team in the entire NFL last season into one game away from the Super Bowl in one season with Jane Daniels as their quarterback. Now, they do have a lot of cap space coming up, more than $78 million. But again, it's a situation kind of like the Packers where because you would imagine the picks are going to be so low that maybe a player gets put in there. And if you trade for Myles Garrett, maybe you would have to give up on Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne, and then the Browns could still get a star-level defensive lineman into that room. You're not going to replace Myles Garrett, but if you can at least get a high-level starter at defensive tackle to replace him, and at least to put on the defensive line, at least you have something there to work with while you add to it with those future assets you're going to get back from Myles Garrett.
All right, so a lot of the national experts are surmising that a lot of Myles Garrett's requested trade goes back to the Browns not having a quarterback. One guy, an established quarterback who can win in the NFL immediately. One guy who has been mentioned in conjunction with the Browns and has won is Kirk Cousins. He was on Good Morning Football Overtime today talking about his season and his future in the NFL.
I definitely still feel like I have a lot of good football left in me. And I will say, about Patrick, because I used to ask this question to coaches like, hey, do I need to be a scrambler to be able to make it in this league long term? Yeah. And coaches would always say, Kirk, you have to be able to throw from the pocket with accuracy no matter what. And while the ability to scramble and do other things is a nice trait to have, ultimately the whole thing is built on, can you from the pocket throw with accuracy and make great decisions? And so that really is the trait we all have to have. And so that's kind of always been what I lean on. But I still think I got good football left in me. And, time will tell. It's still kind of uncertain. We'll get to March and know a lot more. I think the focus for me really is getting healthy. And that's really my focus is I got to get healthy. I'm no good to the Falcons. I'm no good to a team if I'm not feeling really good. And so that's really where my focus has been through January and February. Now the season's wound down, really taking all the time I can to get my body feeling really good.
So, Tim, we also heard the same part of that earlier in the show. Kirk Cousins had an ankle injury that he said the Achilles healed. He said there was a right ankle issue and then it also, he took a big hit that was shoulder and elbow related late in the season against the Saints that kind of threw everything out of whack. You heard him mention decision making. What'd you hear Tommy Reese talk about decision making? It seems like Kirk Cousins might be a fit, and he has a no trade, so he can veto anywhere that the Falcons want to send him that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I mean, that it makes a lot of sense. It seems like, we've talked about that before, as the most likely option for the Browns if they want to fix the quarterback position is hope Kirk Cousins becomes available, sign him to a cheaper contract, and reunite him with Kevin Stefanski from all their time together in Minnesota. And it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Kirk Cousins had that, nightmarish stretch towards the end of the season that led to him getting benched from Michael Penix Jr. But I think if you're at least looking for solid quarterback play, I think Kirk Cousins is the way to go, especially now that you're another year further out from the torn Achilles. Those are usually, I've said before, those are 2-year injuries. That first year, you're getting yourself back to form, and then year 2 is where you're the most like yourself. So you would imagine Kirk Cousins is a nice buy low player to have. And I do think when you look at last year, how things went for the Browns, if they had average quarterback play, that's a team that probably wins 8 or 9 games. They went 3-14 in large part because their quarterback play, by and large, was the worst in football. So you bring in an established veteran, Kirk Cousins. It's not a sexy addition, but it's at least one that should help steady the ship and get things going in the right direction. None of it changes the fact that you still have to reload this entire offense.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin County. I just saw that Myles wants a trade. To me, this is the end of the Barry regime. I mean, I would get rid of them all. Barry, they all have to go. Stefanski. I mean, Myles is a generational player. He's like Jim Brown. Myles wants to be traded. They all have to go. All right, bad news. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, the fan base is angry, and I get it. Obviously, Barry's going to be in charge of this draft. Well, I shouldn't say it appears. Nothing is certain, but it appears Andrew Barry is going to be in charge of the Browns this offseason. And quite frankly, they need to get it right. This is a franchise-altering offseason for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry. You got to find a quarterback, and I think you got to convince Myles Garrett that you can win. Those are 2 things that you can do if you upgrade this roster.
No question about it. I mean, I think that's the price. That's the hidden price of not hitting on the Deshaun Watson trade, unfolding as badly as it has. Because again, it's not just the 3 first-round picks that haven't worked out. It's that you haven't been able to replenish the roster, particularly on offense, with young, cost-controlled players. That Deshaun Watson has played as poorly as he has, and now you find yourself in a position in this upcoming draft where you don't have that Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May type of quarterback that's going to be available for you. Number 2, you have 2 guys in Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders who are not as good as those top 3 guys. I think it's kind of interchangeable between them and guys like J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. as far as pure prospect levels go, but that's why they got that. That's the reason they got contract extensions. They got to figure it out, and they were at this moment, as you said, they're given the opportunity to get this fixed. And as much as Myles Garrett going public, it kind of stains a little bit of this offseason to an extent. I don't think it changes the mission for Andrew Barry that much. You still have to fix the quarterback position. You still have to fix this offense. It was the worst in the NFL on both accounts last season. And I think if you get an offense, I said before when we were talking about Kirk Cousins, I think if you have average quarterback play, you're looking at a team that's much closer to 8 or 9 wins than it is to 3 wins. So just you got to find a way to fix it. And I think by fixing it, at least keeping it steady, you have a better case to go back to Myles Garrett and say, this is why you should stick around in Cleveland. And of course, like we said before, the Browns don't need to trade Myles Garrett. He still has 2 years left on his contract. And, you just look at that whole situation. Unless they get an offer they really can't refuse, they really still hold some power in holding on to Myles Garrett.
All right, so you also did a series of articles kind of grading Andrew Berry's drafts, and I think they're all fair. So 2020 you had a B minus, 2021 a C, 2022 a C, 2023 a B minus. I think those are fair. I know everybody's kind of criticizing and killing his ability to draft players. Some of that is warranted. I mean, you can't miss on top 10 picks. The Jed Wills pick, that was horrible. Greg Newsome wasn't a great pick. He did draft DeJuan Jones, who looked like he can play. He did draft MJ Emerson, looks like he can play. Cedric Tillman looks like he can play. He hasn't had a lot of high picks now. That's because he traded for Deshaun. We come back to the Deshaun Watson trade. Every time we want to figure out why we are in the predicament we're in, it comes back to the Deshaun Watson trade, which, again, when it happened, I thought it was a good trade. So shame on me.
Well, you're not the only one. I kind of felt the same way too. But yeah, going back through this has been an interesting exercise as far as seeing, how Andrew Berry has done it relative to, with the presence of hindsight. And yeah, you talked about Jedrick Wills. He has not been the guy that you expect for a top 10 pick. I mean, he's at least proven he can start, but there's still flaws in his game that really never got better over his last couple seasons, particularly in 2024. That's why I kind of gave it a B minus. So then looking across these drafts, 2021, yeah, Greg Newsome, he wasn't great, but he's at least serviceable. And I think with a late first round pick, that's not the worst outcome. And then JOK, obviously his best pick. Hopefully for the Browns, he's able to play again. But the other thing to think about, that 52nd pick he had in 2021, I believe that's the highest pick he's had in the last 3 years. Remember, the Browns traded out of the second round entirely in both 2022 and 2023. In 22, they traded out of a pick that became John Mechie, and then 2023, that was part of the Elijah Moore deal where they got Moore, and eventually that 74th pick that became Cedric Tillman for a pick that became center Joe Tippmann for the Jets. So when you look at these last 3 grades in particular, 2021, JOK, very good pick. Newsome, okay, and then you look after that, really he did not do much of a good job. Day 3 is pretty murky, and I think if you look at most GMs, you can say the same thing. 2022, 3rd round, MJ Emerson, Alex Wright, very good picks. David Bell, not a very good pick. 4th round, Perion Winfrey, Cade York. Those obviously panned out extremely poorly for the Browns, and really Jerome Ford being at least a solid, number 2, number 3 running back in the 5th round. That's what makes that, passable. And then 2023, Cedric Tillman, I think there's a lot to like. Siaki Ika, I didn't like that pick at the time. Unfortunately for the Browns, it did not pan out well. And then almost the inverse of 2022 when he had a bad 4th round. He had a great 4th round in 23 with DeJuan Jones and Isaiah McGuire. And then the 5th round, you get a rotational defensive back in Cameron Mitchell. And I think there he did a pretty good job. But yeah, looking at these grades, B minus, C, C, B minus, it's average. And I think we have to understand that, not every team can draft as well as the Detroit Lions have the last 5 or 6 years. It's an unprecedented run of success. And I guarantee if the next 5 drafts, the Lions might have a hard time replicating any of that success. So when you look at what Andrew Berry's done, it's not been great, but it hasn't been terrible. It's pretty much towing the line. And I think these last couple drafts, when you haven't had a first-round pick, average is about all you can hope for and hope you can find a true gem.
All right, so let me ask you this. Assuming that the Titans, say they take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. So the Browns have both Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward there at 2. What are you doing if you're Andrew Berry?
I'm taking Shador. I know we talked about it before the show. I know there's concerns, that maybe Shador is not an elite athlete. He doesn't have high-end arm strength and those sorts of things. But honestly, part of me thinks that arm strength is kind of overrated and not as high a priority as we should be looking at the other things. What we look at with Shador Sanders, he's hyper accurate. He's extremely intelligent. He prepares like a professional. And he really got the most, I think, out of a Colorado team that if he wasn't there, would be lucky to win 3 games in 2024. It's because of Shador that they won 9 games last season and made it to a pretty prominent bowl game that they did. I think with Shador, there's obviously concerns, you again, with the averageness of his arm, not the world's greatest athlete. I understand those concerns, but I also think some of the other concerns, that he takes too many sacks. I wonder that's just, he doesn't trust. Number one, hard to trust an offensive line that wasn't very good. And outside of Jordan Seaton, their 5-star offensive tackle last season, didn't have a good offensive line. And number two, he had no running game. His running game was worse than everyone else in the country, worse than a winless Kent State by 12 yards a game. And Kent State was the second worst rushing offense in the country. So basically, Shador had to do everything by himself, and they still won 9 games. I know you ideally want a guy who has all the physical tools, but if you have to pick, and if you have average tools and high-end mental tools, I will take those every time because NFL football is a game that goes 1,000 miles an hour, and if you have a better understanding of what you can see out there, and if the game slows down for you and you're accurate, you can have success.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I can step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Field Yates and Mel Kiper on a wide receiver they really like. Take a look at a mock draft as well. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half-hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Field Yates, Mel Kiper Jr., ESPN's draft analysts, talked about what they have seen in Jack Bech, wide receiver from TCU. This is from First Draft on ESPN.
Who had a breakout season this past year, 62 catches for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. This guy began his college career. He's a Louisiana kid who began his college career at LSU as a tight end. As a true freshman, he led the team in receiving yards. That's right, a roster that also included the likes of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And Bech was the guy that led the team in receiving yards. He's got very good size. He's got good, not great, but good speed. This guy catches everything in his way. He is consistently open. He understands leverage. This guy was a playmaker for TCU this past season. If you told me by the time it's all said and done that Jack Bech goes somewhere at the tail end of round 2 or the top of round 3, I'd say that about adds up based off of where I am at right now in early February on him.
Yeah, you want Jack Bech on your team, Field. You just want him on your team. A quarterback's going to want him. You get it in that vicinity, and he's going to make the catch. I mean, you talk about a guy who will just go up and get the football and battle. Like I said, we're all rooting for Jack Bech. I think he's going to have a heck of an NFL career.
So, Tim, it's a guy that saw quite a bit during Senior Bowl week. I know he's not, a 4-3 guy or a 4-2 guy. Just give me guys that catch the darn ball when it's in their vicinity, and he seems to have that down.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we talked about, drops that the Browns receivers have had over the past couple seasons? I've talked so much about just how they really need to rebuild the running game. We talked so much about the quarterback, but I think they do need to find more depth at receiver behind Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. And, looking at that profile for Jack Bech, watching a little bit of him, I mean, 6'1", 212 pounds, that's a pretty good frame for a receiver. And a guy that really knows how to get open and catch the football, those are guys that are invaluable at receiver. And if you have guys that understand space, understand leverage, those are very nuanced ideas at receiver that really can at times outweigh just the guys who just run fast and get behind defenses. Because then if you understand where you're supposed to be and understand how to set up defenders to help your quarterback get the football, then then you can really manipulate multiple levels of a defense, short, intermediate, and deep, and it really helps out a quarterback. So yeah, there's a lot to like, I think, with Jack Besh. I'm gonna look more into some of these depth receivers as we kind of continue to go on, but he's definitely a guy that, made himself some money at the Senior Bowl last week.
All right, so this is from Pro Football Network. It's a 3-round mock draft. They had the Titans taking Cam Ward, number 1 overall. And then they have the Browns taking Travis Hunter, wide receiver, cornerback from Colorado. The Giants, they have taken Shedeur Sanders right after the Browns. So when you look at Hunter, if you decide to take him, you have to have a plan for him. And as I'm saying that, it's not unlike the plan they had for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They didn't give him everything all at once because you got to make sure. So if he's a receiver, you got to make sure he understands how to be an NFL receiver before you throw him and ask him to be an NFL cornerback as well.
Yeah, no question about it. But I think with Travis Hunter, we don't have to question the athletic ability to play both positions because he's done that. I mean, he might have some of the best athleticism we've ever seen at a draft prospect because we're talking a guy who won the Heisman playing more than 100 snaps a game between both offense and defense, and doing it in Colorado, no less, where you have altitude, which makes it even more impressive. But for me, with Travis Hunter, I've said this before, I think Daniel Jeremiah is on the same page as I am, that I think Travis Hunter might be a better receiver than he is a corner, and if you're the Browns, you're taking him 2nd overall. I think it needs to be as a receiver because, I mean, where are you going to slot him in at corner? I mean, you already have Denzel Ward, MJ Emerson slotted as starters for 2025. I know there's injury concerns with Denzel Ward, and you also have Greg Newsome there for depth. But at receiver, really all you have is Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. And Tillman, I still have a lot of belief in. I think he showed a lot prior to his season-ending concussion. But I think you put Travis Hunter into that offense, and immediately you have another game breaker. And we've talked before about the Browns that maybe Andrew Berry has not. One thing I can say about Andrew Berry, and one thing I can kind of point it to as a piece of criticism, he hasn't drafted enough offensive help, and especially skill positions early in drafts. Most of his early picks have been on defense, and you could see how it's turned into defense that, even though they weren't quite as elite as they were a year ago, was certainly still, I think, would have been better if they were complemented with a much better offense. With Travis Hunter, I mean, I feel like it's easy to just forget how good he was in 2024. I know receiver's not as premium a position as cornerback or edge rusher, but I think for the Browns, considering you had the worst offense in the NFL, you take Travis Hunter and you make him a receiver from day one, and maybe you sprinkle in some 3rd down opportunities as a corner because the experience he has playing both corner and receiver, he understands both sides of that matchup. And when you have that mental edge, you have such an advantage over so many guys you're going against because most corners or receivers by college only play one or the other. They don't play both the way Travis Hunter did.
Yep, I'm with you. As long as you have a plan, and that if it's wide receiver, make sure he's got that down before you use him at the other one. All right. So coming back in the 2nd round, pick 33, that draft has the Browns taking a quarterback, Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. And you and I were talking. I know you're not as into Jackson Dart as I am, and I get it. He kills the middle of the field with accuracy. He moves in the pocket better than I thought he did. I get the whole gimmicky offense and not a lot of throws downfield. I get that as a concern. There's just something about him that the arm strength is pretty good. You know, Lane Kiffin was an NFL guy. Same thing as Shedeur. You know, he played for Pat Shurmur. So there are NFL concepts in that offense.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make it sound like I don't understand the hype of Jackson Dart. I think when it comes to draft prospects, even if I don't necessarily like a guy, I try to do my best to understand why certain people will like him. And I think with Jackson Dart, he has the look. I mean, you look at him, he has some of the physical tools you look for in a quarterback, arm talent, accuracy, those sorts of things. But I feel like, and I talked about this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast on Friday with Dan Lobby and Lance Riseland. I basically said I feel like with Jackson Dart, I'm always left wanting more. I feel like he has all these tools, but for whatever reason, it's just not sticking out to me. I think I watched like about a 9-minute highlight film, and it took about 4 minutes for me to see a throw that I was like, okay, wow, I really see the hype with Jackson Dart. That's not to say he can't be a very good quarterback. Obviously, he had a very good week. He had a good week at the Senior Bowl. He's helping himself out with his stock. Could certainly get in the first round. But there are concerns that I feel like won't be alleviated until he gets on an NFL field. And that's kind of weird to say because of course we're not going to know what these guys are like till they step on an NFL field in September. None of us do. We can't get answers to any of these guys, but when it comes to his ability to process on the field, being in that Ole Miss offense where things can be schemed open so much more easily, it creates those easy completions for Jackson Dart. It's not as easy to do in the NFL. Kevin Stefanski's offense has been capable of doing that, but not nearly at the level at Ole Miss. So certainly there are questions about Dart, and I think if you're the Browns or a team taking him, you kind of have to be willing to let him sit, let him marinate, and let him catch up to NFL speed before you throw him out there.
All right, before I let you go, we got about a minute. Their first pick in the third round, they go with Travion Henderson, running back from Ohio State. And I think if he's there at 67, the Browns will take a cab to get the pickup quicker.
Yeah, I mean, this is an elite running back class. This is one of the best running back classes in recent memory. And I think if you're the Browns, considering the future of Nick Chubb and whether he can be Nick Chubb again is, uncertain, you have to take a running back. You simply have to, especially in day 2. Travion Henderson made himself a lot of money in the playoff. It's a tough call between him and Quinshon Judkins, who's the better running back, but I would give the edge to Henderson a little bit, just because I think he's a little better when it comes to creating explosive plays. And in the NFL, any guy you have on offense that creates explosive plays is a huge positive. So that's why I give Henderson the edge just a tiny bit over Judkins, who's a much more powerful runner.
Tim Bielik, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Always really insightful Browns coverage relative to the draft as well for the Plain Dealer at cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.